It's a question of manipulative energy. Somebody speaks with rah 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 enthusiasm over a trivial thing, over something he's trying to impress me or talk about something that's obviously true, it's trivially true. And he's talking into me, all the aisles and aisles of smiles and energy, and the hands are pumping in my face. He's moving into my space and moving out of the space, and he's got insane enthusiasm. That's just stupid enthusiasm, as I call it. He's over enthused. I refuse to listen to anybody like that. The way to all advice has to be practical, not general, because problems are practical, in my opinion. The problem with a problem is it's not correctly, accurately stated. There's so many hidden premises. There's so much backstory. So much misleading information put out by the body language, by the posture, by the use of the proximus. That's the space between the combatants, the social performers, the social actors, as I call them, in the arena of encounter and confrontation as I see it. It's all a show. It's all initially a pretense. And it keeps on returning to the show and pretense. At times, it figures out a way or finds its way by arrangement to get out of that pretense and that show, but then it always goes back there. That's where it ends. That's where it is. We're all performers on a stage the way I see it. It's all showtime out there, one way or another. You're fighting for time. And the time you fight for is clock time. That's the only time that matters, clock time. Not biological time, but clock time. The inventory you take of yourself has to be very brutal, very practical, very realistic. I call it a diagnosis. With the same seriousness as you're medically diagnosed, or should be medically diagnosed, with that same seriousness. You make the case against yourself. You understand what I'm saying? You gather evidence, you gather argument that argues against you, that presents against you, that makes the worst case scenario. I want to know that first. What's the worst case scenario? And then I want to set up my models, my simulations to prepare myself and get ready to go out into the environment, the arena of encounter and confrontation in the now, and face unrehearsed combatant pushback, resistance, pushback. I'm looking for the toughest, the hardest, the worst, the most discouraging, distracting pushback I can get on myself. I know that if I sweat it out hard and prepare hard, the less I'm going to bleed when the situation matters. You and I, we must learn to perform when it counts. And we have to know when that is. But all of it, I'm sorry to say, begins with nonsense, trivial conversation, inane conversations, I should say, meaningless conversation, time killers, symbolic conversations. And in most cases, if you don't have the personality and the presence, the height, the proportions, the appearance, and appeal, if you don't know how to say it with emotional appeal and perform it like a good performer, a good actor, who's always selling 24 hours a day. They're selling themselves, they're selling their ideas, they're selling everything, and they're trying to create an environment where they have no pushback, where they can double bind in their presentation, double talk. This, everything I'm bringing up here is the din, the aggravation, the frustration of ordinary encounters and confrontations out there in the environment. I'm talking about every single one of them. It takes a long time, a long, long time, to build any foundation, any solidity. The tough part is we have to become adept at trivial conversation, at trivialities, at frivolous conversation. That doesn't mean anything, but it's everything. What am I saying? Sartre said it best. The human reality is a useless passion. In our endeavor to be God, in our endeavor to be perfectly known, perfectly understood, perfectly accepted, we become a useless passion. You better hang on to your gods. You better hang on to your gurus because you're going to need them. You better hang on to your rah, 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 sweet personalities, charismatic people, people who you like to be around because of appearance and personality and aisles of smiles. And of course, the proportions and the height and the TDH. We've all been conditioned to that crap. And we all have to return to that crap. These are the ones who set the standards, who set the values, who set the performance values, who set the criteria for effective functionality. I didn't arrange these things. If I arrange it, I arrange it a lot different. But you're a cool guy. You're a jive guy. You're a shucker. You're instinctive herd master. He's the one who sets the standards and does it subliminally. He knows how to bait his house. He knows how to feed and create the true believer and keep him going on bullshit, on nonsense. And in my day, I've wallowed through so much bullshit and nonsense. And yet, that's the reality. Paradoxically, that's the truth. Not what I'm saying as a philosopher, but the bullshit, the nonsense, the triviality, the show. That's tragically the truth. And that's the tragic flaw. That's the tragedy in the human Dasein. Dasein is described by the great philosopher Martin Heidegger, being in time, human reality. And human reality lives in a world of idle talk, mockery, ridicule, disguises, half-truths, misleading truths, innuendo, and mostly gossip. Mostly gossip. And hearsay conclusions. Everything. Don't trust what I say. Don't trust what anybody says. Check it out for yourself, point for point. Never assume anything. Check it out, point for point. And then you have to test it out. And it's our obligation to test it out, to figure out how we can test it out. Using ourselves as the experiment and the experimenter at the same time with no template. Because each has their own. None has the time. And none will take the time unless there's something in it for them. And I'm talking to the greed principle. What's in it for me? Oh, yeah? Why should I do it? What's in it for me? What do I get out of it? That's the first principle of sales. Then you have to learn how to sell the sizzle and make it sound so appealing. You do that by the phony enthusiasm, aisles and aisles, miles and miles of phony smiles. That's how you do it. There's techniques. The most dangerous thing to do is follow the leader. Most dangerous thing in the world. Because what he or she can get away with, you can't get away with it. They've developed that through their personality, through their gamesmanship. is the word I want to use. When I use personality, I mean the show. I mean the game. I mean the phony fakes that we use out there in public to sell ourselves for one way or another. How we elicit trust only to betray it. Human interactions to me is like a one-eyed jack. You got to turn that card over and look at the other side. The jack has only one eye. Turn him over! Look at the other eye. You got to be very, very concerned about what's around you, about the situation. Have an open mind at all times. Question everything, and I do mean everything. Nothing's ever what it is. It's always what it's not. There's always a backstory. There's always another side to the story. There's always a game. There's a payoff. The real question is, so what's the payoff? What's the payoff? One yips, the other yaps, and everybody yowls. The real question is, what's the payoff and what's the price? Who foots the bill? What's the payoff? What's the price? These are the relevant questions in my mind. All of it's practical, or it's just an academic exercise. It's all practical out there. In my case, I'm a short, small man, 2.5. Terrible proportions, a big fat baby, big old moon face. Moon face never scores. Moon face never does well with the women. And couple that with the height problem and the proportions problem, and you've got a real entanglement confronting you. And if you're fool enough, my short, small man, to look for simple answers, to try to follow the leader, to try to pick up TDH, tall, dark, and handsome vacuum, and try to claim and cry out, it isn't fair, and sing along with Tony Bennett. When is it my chance? When is it my dance? When do the songs they sing for me? There's so many things to mislead, to destroy the short, small man in so doing. My society provides me with so many escapes, so many alibis. That's why it's decadent. So much vicarious pretense. But if it didn't do that, it couldn't function. But there's a price to pay for it. They charge a big bill to sell you your vicarious pretense participation in a dream. I could go into great detail on all this with evidence and argument. But that's another conversation.